Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare. Prahlad Maharaj and Lord Nrsingadev. The evening class that we got up to the Prahlad's prayers in chapter 9 of Canto 7. This comes after the demigods offer their profuse prayers, one after the next, with the intention of satisfying Lord Nrsingadev and with the intention of having him withdraw his anger because he was very angry and roaring very loudly because of his unhappiness of dealing with Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu's tormenting him. When Prahlad approached Lord Nrsingadev at the request of Lord Brahma and the other demigods, his anger immediately subsided. Fearless, Prahlad approached Lord Nrsingadev, fell flat on the ground before him, offering obeisances. The Lord picked him up, smiled, and placed his hand on his head, signifying, benedicting him with Brahma Gyan, because he's just a little boy, and little boys generally don't know how to offer sophisticated prayers, and he says that the demigods all have very eloquent speech, and that was, who am I? I'm a little boy. But because you're very kind, I know that you'll accept even the little that I have to offer you. So we're continuing. Canto 7, Chapter 9, text number 16. O most powerful, insurmountable Lord. Insurmountable. See what the Sanskrit is. Who are so kind to the fallen souls. Kripana Vatsala. Kripana is miser, and Vatsala is affectionate like a parent. You're kind upon the fallen souls who have no spiritual knowledge. I have been put into the association of demons as a result of my activities. And therefore I'm very much afraid of my condition of life within this material world. When will that moment come when you will call me to the shelter of your lotus feet, which are the ultimate goal for liberation from conditional life? Now this is chapter 9. Prabhupada writes in the introduction to chapter 6, which is the chapter where he's speaking to his classmates. By understanding the ways and the mood, a nice example of Prahlad, one can understand the way of pure devotional service. So he's speaking things in chapter 9 that are different than the words he speaks in chapter 10. In chapter 9, he's indicating that he's taken birth due to his bad activities in the past. Due to his bad activities in the past, he was born in a demoniac family, and therefore calling to the Lord to elevate him, free him from that contaminating association, and take him again to his abode in the spiritual world. However, in chapter 10, he says he was sent from the spiritual world to this world to teach the way of pure devotional service. Teach means both the words and by example. It's a contradiction. It sounds like contradiction. Is it this or is it that? Is he from the spiritual world, or is he from a demoniac past and therefore taking birth in a demoniac family? And which is it? But he's speaking, my understanding is this, he's speaking as if he's one of us, when on the other hand he reveals he's not. For example, when Narada saw Kayadu and saw what was going on and the demigods were taking her away and so forth, he said, don't harm this child, he's an elevated soul. I mean, Narada somehow, by his spiritual prowess, he knew that he wasn't what he's saying in this verse. He wasn't taking birth in Hiranyakashipu's family because of his bad activities in the past. Even before he was born, he was an elevated soul, what to speak of after. So he's speaking in this way, as pure devotees will sometimes do. They speak as if they're disqualified. And that's part of their qualification. It's not just cute or clever or manipulative or something like that. It's actually how they feel about themselves. The concept of dainya, or humility, is a Vaishnava quality, and he's teaching, as Prabhupada said in chapter 6, the way of pure devotional service. So pure devotional service includes dainya, or genuine humility. Here's a nice example. There's many. One nice example is in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You familiar with Chaitanya Charitamrita? A little bit? You've heard of it. It's a biography about Lord Chaitanya's life, very lengthy, written by Krishnadas Kaviraj. And Krishnadas Kaviraj was requested by the Vaishnavas to write because he's a Kaviraj. He's the king of Kavis, of learned persons. He had consummate mastery of Sanskrit. He wrote literatures that demonstrate his poetic skill, his mastery of Sanskrit, his mastery of the teachings of devotion. But when he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, he wrote in Bengali, in part because Sanskrit may be unapproachable for everyday people. So he wrote in a language that they could access, but the presentation itself it's most astounding. Krishnadas Kaviraj's writing it demonstrates his command of who is Lord Chaitanya and who are the followers of Lord Chaitanya, and their teachings about bhakti and their teachings about everything that Lord Chaitanya taught. He understood it, and he expresses it very eloquently. But at the same time, he speaks of himself in very deprecating terms, like shocking. Lord Chaitanya said, "I'm lower than the straw in the street." Krishnadas Kaviraj says, "I'm lower than a worm in stool." Lower than a worm in stool. And more sinful than Jagai and Madhai. Now, he's not sinful. He's not low. And he's not just speaking because it's cute to say something like that. Oh, isn't that nice? He's feeling. Then if you're feeling like that, how can you write Chaitanya Charitamrita? he's writing from a different platform than showing off or exhibiting his erudition. He's writing on the order of the Vaishnavas. He's full, and they're requesting him to share that full, because the part of the reason was, after he's gone, who's going to know all these things? So you should capture it in writing. You should capture it in writing, so that future generations like us can know about Lord Chaitanya in detail, the kind of detailed manner that Krishnadas Kaviraj was capable of capturing in a written form. So Prahlad is doing like this also. He's pure devotee. And he knows that he's sent to teach the ways of pure devotion. That's chapter 10. Here he's describing as if he's not. And it's to teach us the way of pure devotion. An elevated person doesn't think highly of themselves. And certainly not before the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He knows Lord Nrsimhadev is the Personality of Godhead. He knows his exaltedness. Most powerful, insurmountable Lord who are kind to the fallen souls. So he's invoking that feature of him, this kindness upon the fallen souls feature. Saying, he, on the one hand, he's fearless. On the other, because he's fearless. But he's fearful. He's fearful of his condition of life within the material world. Not fearful like, a worldly kind of fearful, a transcendental kind of caution fearful, being, quite concerned about the risk, because when we're in the material world, there's risk. It's a dangerous place. Padam, yadvi padam, natesham. It's the alliteration is Sanskrit. It's a composition of Prahlad describing the danger of this material world. Padam, yadvi padam, natesham. Nice Sanskrit. Dangerous place. But he's fearless. Yet he's not careless. He's careful. Because he knows there's danger. And he knows where the protection from danger or safety is, and that's with holding the hand of Lord Nrsimhadev. He's safe. Sure enough, he is safe. Sure enough, he's safe. Prabhupada's purport. Being in the material world is certainly miserable, but certainly, when one is put into the association of asuras or atheistic men, it is intolerably so. One may ask why the living entity is put into the material world. Indeed, sometimes foolish people deride the Lord for having put them here. Actually, everyone is put in a conditional life according to his karma. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj, representing all other conditioned souls, admits that he was put into life among the asuras because of the results of his karma. Now, he didn't have karma. He was a pure devotee even before he was born. There's no karma. But he's speaking like that, as if that's this understanding of the humility of a Vaishnava. The Lord is known as Kripana Vatsala because he is extremely kind to the Kripanas, the conditioned souls. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, therefore, the Lord appears whenever there are discrepancies in the execution of religious principles. What's the Sanskrit for that? Does anybody know? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srajamyaham. Thank you. Some of you are reading Prabhupada's books. That's good. The Lord is extremely anxious to deliver the conditioned souls, and therefore he instructs all of us to return home back to Godhead. What's that verse? Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yeshami ma suchaha. Thus, Prahlad Maharaj expected that the Lord, by his kindness, would call him again to the shelter of his lotus feet. In other words, everyone should be eager to return home back to Godhead, taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus being fully trained in Krishna consciousness. Back home, back to Godhead. What's back home, back to Godhead mean anyways? Back home, back to Godhead. Is it a place, or is it consciousness, or is it both? Is it like a geographic somewhere out there is back to Godhead? Huh? It's consciousness. One can be back to Godhead while in this apartment. Here's a nice Prabhupada story. You like Prabhupada stories? Prabhupada was visiting Los Angeles. It was when he would come to visit a place, devotees came from all over, especially a big city like Los Angeles or New York or something like that. They would come from all over. So, a big reception at the airport. There was some reporters interviewing him at the airport, and then he came in a nice car, came to the temple, came before the deities, and spoke a little bit to the devotees, and then he went to his rooms. His rooms in Los Angeles are to get to his little living space. You have to go up. You go out the front side of the temple, up a flight of stairs, and then back behind where the deity room is. Not above the deities, but above the deity room. And it's little Prabhupada's quarters. So he was there in his quarters, and the devotees were crowded around. I wasn't there, but I heard the description. And Prabhupada was saying, looking around the room, saying, I know that when I'm not with you, you're always wanting to know, where is Prabhupada and what is he doing? And it's true. We'd get reports. Technology wasn't like it is today, where you get instant text messages and things. But people would hear. So Prabhupada is leaving India soon. He's going to Japan, and this is what he did in Japan. And then he went to Australia, and in Australia he did this and that and the other thing. Went to the farm community and da 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 da. And then he went to Hawaii, and when Prabhupada was in Hawaii, he stayed for so many days, and now I've arrived in Los Angeles. So I know that you're speaking like this about me, but you should know I'm always with Krishna. In other words, even as he was sitting in front of them, although he is there in Los Angeles, he's always with Krishna. And so that's consciousness. He would carry consciousness of Krishna, or carry the hankering for Vrindavan, which was his home. Home is where the heart is, right? There's that saying, home is where the heart is. So he was always with Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. So back to Godhead is our original consciousness. There is a place, and in that place is the personality of Godhead. And we get access to that place even when we're not physically, or say it the other way, you can go physically there and your consciousness can be in the gutter. You can be a robber and be in Vrindavan, and you're not in Vrindavan. Or you can be some remote place. And anyway, back to Godhead, we should be clear what that means. It does mean taking part with Krishna in his activities, his service, and our business of serving him is restored and revitalized. That's what back to Godhead means. Text 17. O Great One, O Supreme Lord, because of combination with pleasing and displeasing circumstance, and because of separation from them, one is placed in a most regrettable position within heavenly or hellish planets, as if burning in a fire of lamentation. Although there are many remedies by which to get out of miserable life, any such remedies in the material world are more miserable than the miseries themselves. Therefore, I think that the only remedy is to engage in your service. Kindly instruct me in such service. There's a stage of devotional service that's hankering. Material hankering is not ideal. It's entangling. But spiritual hankering is ideal. It's not hankering is expecting or wishing, aspiring for a higher consciousness position. Not, that the circumstances be different, but let the consciousness be different. It's the same. The material hankering is, my situation is X, and I was aspiring, I had minus X, now I have X, and now I want 3X. Because it's not satisfying. Dushparena analena cha. Anala means fire. Burns like fire. Desire is never satisfied, and it burns like fire. Spiritual hankering is different. I'm here, but I hanker for being with Krishna, or being in Krishna consciousness. And that turning attention towards hankering. One of the japa retreats that we conducted, the Festival of the Holy Name, the theme was "Say Yes to Krishna." And I'm in Houston. I didn't conduct that theme, so we'll conduct that theme next time I go to Houston for a japa retreat. It's "Say Yes to Krishna." Say yes to the holy name, and it's that kind of a Y standing for yearning, E standing for enthusiasm, and S standing for spontaneous. Yearning comes first. Enthusiasm, as yearning becomes matured, comes next, and then spontaneous. The stages of bhakti, the life of the teaching of Lord Chaitanya is the teaching of spontaneous love for Krishna, because it's spontaneous love for Krishna that allows one to enter into Braja, the abode of the Supreme Lord, and pastimes serving the devotees who are eternally assisting him and serving him. Being there in that position is a stage of spontaneous devotional service. And there are steps to get there. And the step that precedes getting there is yearning to get there. Or hankering. That's what he's... And then by associating specifically the process of bhakti given by Rupa Goswami, which was given by Lord Chaitanya, the spontaneous stage is absorbing one's thoughts and entering into the mood and being the servant of those who are eternal servants, which is high. There are eternal associates of Krishna, and they have different moods, different rasas or relationships with Krishna, and meditating, becoming followers of them, while externally engaged in Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, internally engaged in this contemplation on eternal associates of Krishna, and meditating upon them, and etc., etc., etc. There's procedures that are prescribed. There's a sadhana for spontaneous devotional service. Raga Nuga Sadhana Bhakti. It's in Rupa Goswami's writings. It's in Nectar Devotion. And that's the path that we're on. It starts with some proper following, knowing the rule, the vidhis and the nishadas, the things to do and the things not to do. But you all know, I'll just remind you, there's a purpose behind all things that you're to do and not to do. Sarva vidi nishedha shurs etoyor eva kinkara is okay. I know the rest of the verse. I'm just explaining the words of the second half. So the purpose is to remember Krishna. Smartavya satatam vishnur. Smarana. Remembrance. Satatam. Always. And all of those vidhis of bhakti are kinkaras, or servants of that one principle. It's Rupa Goswami's teaching when you read Nectar Devotion. Some of you may be studying Bhakti Shastri, some of you maybe are teachers of Bhakti Shastri, but it's when Rupa Goswami lays out what the rules and the prohibitions are, he says there's one thing that's the essence of all of them. All of them are in pursuance of one thing. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. That's Krishna consciousness. So what is it that you can always remember and never forget? Something that you're attached to. Supposing you're not attached yet. Supposing you're not at the spontaneous stage yet. Suppose, more than suppose. We're not. Then what do? You follow some vidhis, nishedas. For what purpose? So that you become attached to. And when you're attached to something, you think of that something. That's a principle that's explained in Bhagavad Gita. Whatever the mind is fixed on at the moment of death, that's where the soul will go. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Smaran, there's the word again. Smaran bhavam. Chajat ante. Chajat ante, at the end, when you give up this body, kalevaram, for certain. You'll go to that which the mind is fixed upon. So what's your mind fixed upon? And the vidhis of bhakti are to help those that have a yearning to be connected again with Krishna. So they follow. So there's the preliminary desire is self-realization. Not just the preliminary desire of liberation, like, this is a crazy place, I want out of here. I'm frustrated. It's not nice. Let me out of here. Not the liberationist or salvationist or moksha idea, but the higher consciousness of being rightfully situated. When there is association with Vaishnavas, then that becomes awakened. Let's say it differently. It's already there, but it's not awakened in material consciousness through material association. Just like, these young devotees here. They're very fortunate because from a young age, they're hearing how a small person or young person assimilates these messages. Of course, it's going to differ from person to person, but the impression is there. Most valuable to go towards the position where it's real happiness, it's not the cosmetic kind. because there's no happiness in the cosmetic kind. There's no happiness there. So when there's a preliminary adau shraddha, preliminary faith, then I want to go beyond this limitation of looking at objects and thinking that maybe there's some happiness over there. I want to go beyond that. It can, it doesn't have to be so explicit and so crystal clear and sharp and in focus, but preliminary. And then with association of devotees, it starts to get a little clarity and then some activities, yearning for that position. And at least those who are in Lord Chaitanya's associates, getting that association. Prahlad, because he's teaching the ways of pure devotional service. All these temporal things are sources of misery. Please be kind upon me and pick me up. Mahaprabhu said, place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. When will that day be mine? Kabe habe bolo se dinamar. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a song like that. When, oh when will that day be mine? That's the yearning, that's the hankering. And then the steps are the vidhis, the practices of sadhana, without detailing. There's the nectar devotion. For the purpose of Vishnu Smarana, remembrance of that which we have forgotten. Yeah. Remembrance of that which we have forgotten means we're all originally Krishna conscious entities, but we've forgotten. And so it's there, it's just covered over. So covered over, we can't find it. We've all had the experience that we lost something. We know it's somewhere because we just had it, but then it's lost. So when you've had something that you remember having, and you're searching, and you know it's there somewhere, just can't find it. We all know what that one's like. But what about something that's so far distant that you can't even remember having it? Is the eagerness to find it the same? And original Krishna consciousness is not like that. It's been so far covered. Is this really what our natural consciousness is? How do you stay on that course? The answer is because it is original consciousness. And when that original consciousness is touched by one who's carrying bhakti, layers and layers and layers of dust are quickly removed, commonly. And the forgetfulness turns into some faint trace of remembrance. Oh yeah. And then it gets covered again. No, the enthusiasm, this is the yearning may wane, but when it becomes more steady, it becomes a kind of enthusiasm. So, reading this section, many of you probably have read it more than once. I've read it many, many, many times and spoken about it many, many times. It's very powerful because, as Prahlad said, in chapter 10, Krishna sent him, or he doesn't say, the Supreme Lord, you sent me to this world, to a place where people are suffering so much, to teach the ways of pure devotional service. So he's teaching by his words and by his example. So hearing these, it helps us stay on track. When devotional service, from where your perspective, it goes up, and then it goes down. Sine curve. And then it goes up, and then it goes down. Then it goes up. And that unsteady is the standard. for those in the practicing stage. It's got a name, Anushtita Bhakti. Standard. So why does the down come? Because the impetus, the yearning becomes weaker over time. We start yearning for temporary again. And then it becomes weaker. And then we go down. It's just, it's because we're covered. So we need association to help us stay on track, and through sound vibration to continue to remind ourselves and remind each other of what a real mission in this human form of life is. And it's not the cosmetic material thing. There's needs, necessities on the material side for sure. And there's a spiritual necessity that we in good association will not neglect. Because if we start neglecting, someone's going to gently tap us on the shoulder or hold our hand or whatever is needed, splash some water in our face maybe, and say, you forgot. So hearing from Prahlad is like that. That's how it works for me, at least. Purport for text 17. Aspiring to engage in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, after the death of his father, Prahlad Maharaj would have inherited his father's property, which extended throughout the world. But Prahlad Maharaj was not inclined to accept such material opulence, for whether one is in the heavenly or hellish planets, or is a rich or poor man's son, material conditions are everywhere. Therefore, no condition of life is at all pleasing. If one wants the uncontaminated pleasure of blissful life, he must engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Material opulence may be somewhat pleasing for the time being, but to come to that temporary pleasing condition, one must work extremely hard. When a poor man is rich, he may be better situated, but to come to that position, he had to accept many miseries. The fact is that in material life, whether one is miserable or happy, both conditions are miserable. Time is separating. If you're up, wait a while. Whatever you have is going to be taken by time. And then you're miserable. Whatever it is, good health, wealth, something, and then it's gone. If one actually wants happy, blissful life, he must become Krishna conscious and constantly engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the real remedy. The entire world is under the illusion that people will be happy by advancing in materialistic measures to counteract the miseries of conditional life, but this attempt will never be successful. Humanity must be trained to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement. There can be no happiness in changing one's material conditions, for everywhere there is trouble and misery. This message is not a new one. It's in Bhagavad Gita. From the highest planets down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. Abrahma bhuvana loka purnar arbarta norjuna. It's common. It's universal that people, Krishna says in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, most people think that the purpose of the Vedas is to prosper in this life and the next. And the understanding the purpose of the Vedas is something beyond prospering in this life and the next is unknown to most people. The attraction is for asat instead of sat. I've done this experiment with different audiences rather than elaborating. Here in America, one time, I remember at University of Jaipur. It's a long story of how I got there, but I was invited to speak to a room full of people that I had never met before. And this thought came to me. It's like one of those, in India, the rooms are very thick walls, like 3-foot thick walls, very institutional feeling, kind of echoey until people get packed up in the thing. So it was a big hall. The hall was, I don't know, 150 people or more. And so here I am in front of this educated audience. And so let's get to know the audience. So I said, I'm going to make a statement and hear the whole statement before you raise your hand. But how many of you would agree to the following statement? The purpose of the Vedas is, 1, engage in pious activity. 2, so that in this life you will prosper. 3, and after this life you go to heaven. The purpose of the Vedas is those 3 things. How many would agree? Everybody raise their hand. Almost everybody. So I said, anybody have a different idea? One girl in the back of the room, because in India girls have to sit in the back of the room. And she raised her hand. So give her a microphone. What's your understanding of the purpose of the Vedas? And she just said what Prabhupada says. The purpose of the Vedas, what Krishna says, the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. She didn't quote the Sanskrit, but she knew the purpose. And all of our activities should be engaged towards that goal. And when we engage in that goal, we'll be able to understand Krishna and return back home, back to Godhead. That's the purpose of human life. So, wow, you must be reading Prabhupada's books. She said yes. So those who read Prabhupada's books get the message because it's repeated, because sometimes repetition is necessary for clear understanding. But sometimes people think they already understand when they don't, and then it's more difficult. You know what I mean? Recently I heard a lecture that Prabhupada gave in Hyderabad. The Hyderabad temple, you can hear the echoing sound because it's a big hall in the temple room in Hyderabad. And he was saying, look around you and see these young European American devotees. Now they've come to the point of dedicating their lives to service to Krishna. Now how did that happen? And he just explained how it happened was they heard from me again and again and again and again. They heard so many times the futility of trying to find happiness through acquiring objects for the senses and enjoying those sense objects. And they've understood that there's a higher purpose, and they're dedicating their lives to that higher purpose because they've heard again and again. So Prabhupada was very clear. He didn't mind saying, in different ways, of course, but it's not a new message or unheard of before novel message. It's a refrain. And there's a purpose behind the refrain. It's so it's really clear, and it goes in. Because sometimes Lord Brahma says in his prayers to Krishna, some of you know the passage, the Brahma Vimohan Lila. Vimohan means he became bewildered. After stealing the calves and the cowherd boys, then Krishna showed identical forms of the calves and cowherd boys. And then he showed all the forms of Narayana and all the potencies of Narayana and a cacophony of sound as they were all offering prayers to all those forms of Narayana simultaneously, big noise. And then poof, they all just disappeared because they were manifestations of Krishna. And everything is a manifestation of Krishna. So in one of his prayers, Brahma says, the most learned person in the universe, the original recipient of all the Vedas, says to Krishna, some people say, I know all about Krishna, but as for me, I don't say so much. And some people think they already know. And if somebody thinks they already know, it's pretty hard to teach them. There's music instructors that say, when they take a student, do you already know how to play this instrument? If they say yes, they charge more because they're a more difficult student than one that knows they don't know. If you know you don't know, it's easier to help somebody understand than if they think they know. And even whether they don't know or they think they know and they don't know, repetition is sometimes needed. And in the acharya for this purpose, teaching the ways of pure devotional service, is Prahlad. So it's in his prayers, in these chapters, his teachings to his classmates, his words to his two teachers, his words to his father, his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, they're very consistent about the futility of pursuing happiness through fruitive activities and the miserable consequences instead of the happy consequences, blissful consequences, and the preferred path of transcendence. He says it directly to Hiranyakashipu, who wants to kill him. One more verse. Text 18. O my Lord Nrsingadev, by engaging in your transcendental loving service in the association of devotees who are liberated souls, hamsas, I shall become completely uncontaminated by the association of the three modes of material nature and be able to chant the glories of your Lordship who are so dear to me. I shall chant your glories, following exactly in the footsteps of Lord Brahma and his disciplic succession. In this way, I shall undoubtedly be able to cross the ocean of nescience. Now he's saying Lord Brahma because who is the spiritual master of Narada Muni, who is Prahlad's spiritual master? Who is the spiritual master of Narada Muni? His father, Brahma. Brahma, Narada, Vyas. So, Narada had many disciples, not just Vyas, but Prahlad was one of his disciples. And so he's offering that he wants to be connected to the teachings of pure devotion that come through Narada from Brahma. He wants to be connected like that. So this is on the hankering topic now, or the yearning for association of devotees. Through that yearning for association of devotees, coming to the stage where we're yearning for that connection with the Supreme, and then attachment to the Supreme, the object, the subject, and the object, and then the relationship. That's bhakti. Subject, object, and relationship. And the relationship has its rasa, or taste. And the taste of that relationship, as we like to have friends and family and all those nice relationships. And the superlative relationship is relationship with the Supreme. And access to that relationship with the Supreme is through relationships with those who are in relationship with the Supreme, to the devotees. Those who are carrying bhakti, the greatest treasure that we have and we can give to our families and others is that, devotion, bhakti. We do other things for sure, but those other things that we do are meant in that spirit, or the holistic picture of a life of devotion is that. And later, Prahlad becomes a householder, he has children, he rules a kingdom. He ends up having this. He doesn't want it, and therefore he's an eligible candidate to receive it. He's given, humongous opulence. He doesn't become distracted by it. He doesn't lose his Krishna consciousness because of having opulence. He's not attracted to it. He uses it. It's a nice lesson. And it's a lesson not just like, let's look up at Prahlad and say, wow, he's really great, and I'm way down here. But that's okay. You be honest with where you are, but see the standard of pure devotion, and the principles of pure devotion, and strive in that direction. And that's what our devotional practice, that's what our sadhana is meant for. Sadhana, to reach the sadhya, the goal. The relationship. The fulfilling, loving relationship. And that fulfilling, loving relationship has its shelter in all other relationships, within the family, within friends and community. That's complete. It's not something over here. It's like, the material side of my life and the spiritual side of my life. It's not the proper picture. It's not the holistic picture of devotional service. All things have their place. All things have their place. And how to see what's the place for all these things? It's resting upon Krishna consciousness. Therefore, the sadhana has a big role to play in awakening Krishna consciousness and association with devotees. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. I'm kind of feeling better that I started late because some emergency came up just before I left, so I dealt with the emergency, so we got here late. And I was thinking, oh boy, I don't like being late, but it's a good thing I was late. Because some of you came a little bit later. But normally, I like going into the future, I like to start on time. Nice. So let's see if there's some discussion. Oh yeah. I'll do it at the end. It's ice cream. You want some ice cream? I'll give you some ice cream at the end. Got really hot. All of a sudden, 86 degrees today.
Hey Krishna Guru Maharaj. So this is something yesterday we read in our Bhagavatam reading group. I will just read it, the same sentence. It's very similar to what we are talking about today, but I just have a question there. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of Canto 3, Chapter 15, 33.
Canto 3, Chapter
15,
15,
33.
33, okay.
So at the end of that purport, he says, if the members of the ISKCON, putting faith in Krishna as a center, live in harmony according to the order and principles of Bhagavad Gita, then they are living in Vaikuntha, not in this material world.
Yes.
So I'm trying to practice that or understand more about putting faith in Krishna as a center. How, what are the practical situations?
Well, let's start with what is faith, and is it intrinsic to the soul? Start there. Faith is defined very nicely by Krishnadas Kaviraj. I was speaking about his kavi, his poetic capacity. So he wrote a verse, Shraddha Shabde Vishvas Kahe Sudridha Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti. Well, the first part is what is Shraddha means, having confidence that by fulfilling one thing, all other things are accomplished. For a materialist, money, get money. Money, money, money. Hook or crook, get money, because when money is the honey, get money. Very focused. You get one thing and all the other things are fulfilled. Or an athlete, etc. Get one thing and all the other things are fulfilled. So faith means confidence that if I achieve one thing, all other things are fulfilled. That's the first line. That's what faith is. And then the second line is Krishna bhakti. Krishna is vocative, unto Krishna. Sarva karma kritahaya. Sarva karma krita. All other things are fulfilled, just get Krishna bhakti. Achieve that one thing, the other things are fulfilled. I don't, the other things are peripheral. I don't like throw them, trash them, but they're peripheral. If I put water on the root of the tree, and you've taken care of watering the tree, etc. So you do that one thing. So that's what faith is. And it's a how-to question, right? How to strengthen faith in taking shelter of Krishna. The answer, the how-to question, my answer of the last 6 months has been sadhusanga. So Prabhupada's answer, if somebody's saying, how do I become something? His answer is, how do you become a drunkard? You associate with people who drink. You go to bars and associate with people who drink, and you become a drunkard. If you want to become scholarly, what do? You go to a university and study and associate with people who are scholarly. You become scholarly. The potential is there. That's the method. And you want to become a devotee. You associate with devotees. You want to become sincere. You associate with those who are sincere. You value that quality, and you direct things to that one thing, because but this one thing, other things will be fulfilled. And bhakti requires faith. Faith is intrinsic to the soul. That's a whole chapter. Divisions of Faith chapter in Bhagavad Gita is on that topic. Supposing somebody doesn't have faith in Krishna, do they have faith in something? Which means, is faith intrinsic to the soul? The answer is yes. If they don't have faith in Krishna, they're going to have faith in the modes. And there's faith according to this, that, and the other mode. Divisions of Faith. That's the title of the chapter. So we try to dial down the faith according to the mode that we're conditioned by, and dial up the faith in Krishna by associating with those that have strong faith in Krishna. And especially those that are there's scriptural foundation for what they're doing. They're not just the sentiment is fortified by wisdom. To associate with such faithful persons will help nurture and nourish your faith. And related, simple. I like things that are simple. When you act in knowledge, it increases faith. Here's how it works. Something is knowledge. You hear it, you go, wow, that makes sense to me. That resonates. Let me try that. So you act in knowledge. And what happens is you get some realization. When you get some realization, your faith increases. And you go back to that source that you heard from that said that interesting thing that you thought you resonated with. So you go back and your faith can get nourished further by getting that which is genuine knowledge. That's how faith is increased. Faith in taking shelter of Krishna. So things that you hear, it's very, very simple. You hear something. Let's say out of what time we spent today, something that you heard resonated. Then you do it. And try to do it with consistency. And something will happen. You go, wow, that was good. Faith increased by acting in knowledge through association with those that have faith and have knowledge or wisdom. So we keep that sadhusanga principle in our life. Don't become complacent, and that there's some do-nots. Don't become casual, or don't make offense, and there's some do-nots. Don't see as the material that which isn't material. That's the essence of offense. And appreciate the kindness that Krishna has given by giving that opportunity to go beyond birth and death, beyond the bondage of ignorance. So that will increase your faith. You just stay with it. Even there's ups and there's downs. In fact, when there's down periods, that's a really good opportunity to have faith strengthened. Because where's your shelter when things are down? The false shelters have been taken. They didn't hold up. They weren't really shelters after all. Okay. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
With the with context to what you explained for the back to Godhead understanding, and we said that it's consciousness that got me a little confused with the Goloka Vrindavan concept that we have.
That's real. It's a real place.
That's a real place,
Oh yeah.
but we earn to go there, and then
Where to go there? And how do you go there? Not get in a rocket ship. By consciousness.
okay,
You can be in, wherever your home is, or you can be at your office, wherever your office is, or you can be wherever you are, and be with Krishna. That was what I was explaining. Prabhupada wasn't denying that he was traveling and doing, and et cetera, et cetera. He wasn't denying that. But you should know I'm always with Krishna. He left Vrindavan to go to the west to do some service. But his heart was always with Krishna. That was his home. Home is where the heart is. That's where his home was. That's where his heart was. Wherever he was, doing whatever he did. And so we can become like that. And then it's a real place, back to Godhead. There's a place. And Krishna's there. With his eternal associates. Anything else? Okay, Amara over here behind you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question is, Maharaj, about detachment. So I was thinking, like trying to contrast between being detached versus understanding that anyways I'm not in control.
You just want to hear more about that topic?
No.
What's the rest? What's the rest?
The rest is like, this is not obviously real detachment.
What is not?
That understanding that anyways nothing is in my control.
That's the beginning. It's not wrong. It's just not complete.
But doesn't it have a sense of like some grudge or something kind of?
I don't understand your question. Articulate your question better. I'm not clear what you're asking.
Like there is nothing that is in our control. There is this kind of
We're
understanding.
servants, we're not controllers.
Yeah.
You have some modest control. You can step with your right foot first or your left foot first. We have modest control, but we're not supreme controllers. We're tiny Ishwaras and we're not Parameshwara. We have some control.
But I should ask, like, what is the real conception of detachment?
The real concept, the real position is we're servants. The tiny controller is meant to serve the supreme controller. And in service to the supreme controller, you do so many things. You take care of your family, and you cook in the kitchen, and you're thising and thating. You have control over, what you prepare for breakfast for the kids and to send in their lunch. You have control over that. And you subordinate that control to the supreme controller's service. And that way you're controlled.
Understood. I hope.
Yeah.
So Maharaj, you said that people think that they understand, but they don't. And that is a very difficult situation.
Yeah, it's more difficult.
So, like, how can one understand? Because they think that they understand, that, but they don't, and they also don't know that this is their situation.
They don't know that they don't know.
Yeah. So how? I mean, how how will they understand
Gently,
or putting myself in that situation?
to help others that think that they understand when they don't, is just to be a good example, Sattva, and very patient. Don't expect them to change by, you're having the right understanding and banging on the head. You don't have the right understanding. I mean, that's a technique, but it's not very effective. So what to do is be a good example. And the context can be all kinds of things. The context can be people out there. That can be, family members, could be relatives, can be, all kinds of things. So the best is be a good example.
I was thinking for myself, Maharaj, if I am in this situation that I don't know, but I don't.
You don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's most of us. So
how-
now what to do? What to do? You associate, this is the topic is becoming humble. To learn that you don't know requires becoming humble. So part of becoming humble is to become cleansed, and becoming cleansed of misconceptions. So that takes some time. So you hold up the misconception and see where the misconception has holes in it. The bucket's got holes in it. Here's a bucket. Let's put some water in the bucket. Let's see what happens. And it starts to leak out all over the place. The bucket's got holes in it. You see it again and again and again. Okay, the bucket's got holes. What am I going to do next? You can't let go of the bucket that's got holes in it unless you know it has holes in it. So the conception of thinking that I know doesn't hold. But, people are proud and stubborn and all kinds of things like that. So they may not even see the water leaking out of the bucket. They just keep putting water in the bucket. It's leaking all over the place. I'll fix it. I'll adjust this and adjust that, and then it won't be a leaky bucket anymore. Endless. When people are stubborn, then Prabhupada calls it stubborn obstinacy. We call it sometimes dog obstinacy. So that's difficult for someone or for you. So to associate with those who know and see their quality and their character, and it's powerful. Purity is powerful. Purity can help one get to the other side of pride and thinking that I know and I don't know. But pride's a big obstacle. Big obstacle.
Yes. Maharaj, if it is okay, I have
One more. Two more.
If,
You got the microphone. Go for it.
Maharaj, how can we make sure that we are having wholesome association with different gradations?
Oh,
of
yeah. How
devotees?
can you be sure? Yeah, make wise choices. And be very clear what wholesome means.
Krishna consciousness.
Well, yeah, but then how do you know what's Krishna consciousness? Many of us have found, I'm one, who found in the early stages of my devotional service, I didn't have the qualification to understand what good association was. Who is an advanced devotee? I learned it early. It wasn't like I didn't get slapped in the face. It was just, I got this realization, I really don't have the qualification to know who's advanced. I had a certain, role model devotee in the temple And he was doing nice service and had nice qualities and gave nice classes. And one day he and his wife just disappeared. I was like, whoa. So then let your criteria be scriptural and, road tested over time. When there's steadiness, it's exactly what Arjuna says 3 times in Bhagavad Gita. How do I understand who is self-realized? What are their characteristics? You go by, you look at things through the lens of Scripture, not just your own subjective imagination.
Sorry, Maharaj, I think I lost that.
The last one you lost. Okay. Anyone else in the room? Because
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. A similar like attachment. When a person die, that time he's having attachment. He knows that he's having so many attachment with their kids and grandchild also, with them also. So that time they know also I have so many attachment, and we are praying to Krishna. Krishna, I don't want this attachment. And they are suffering with the pain when they are having last days in their life.
yes.
So they are suffering with the pain, and they know that this is not the good time with the attachment and looking at their grandparents, children and all.
Yes.
So that time Krishna will help them. How to like Krishna will help them.
Well, Krishna
with that.
doesn't. There's 2 things. Krishna does not interfere with free will, including attachments. Krishna doesn't interfere with free will. He'll encourage, he'll give reminders, but he doesn't interfere. So free will is intrinsic to the soul, just as faith is intrinsic to the soul. You're with me? Faith is intrinsic to the soul. Free will is also. So Krishna doesn't interfere. On the other hand, supposing that person who has these attachments that you're describing, somewhere back there was some efforts, sincere efforts to get closer to Krishna. So Krishna may prompt that person to remember, because he's the source of remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Remembrance may go to some degree in that direction. But the cloud in the sky is still going to be there, the attachment to the temporary, and Krishna doesn't interfere with that. So it's a mix.
She's having attachment, but I'm sorry. She know whatever she is doing, this is wrong, but she's praying to Krishna also for that.
That's okay. That's good. I mean, it's a mix. You can dial up the Krishna factor and try. But it's not. The fact of the matter is, where one's attachments are, that's where the mind is going to go. Even you're praying and trying, Krishna will recognize that. But the attachments are where the mind is going to go. You can't just do a last minute fix, in other words. There's a life of cultivation, and we're responsible for how we use our free will during our life up to the last minute.
And
Try the microphone, it might help.
I heard and I read also like bhakti is sanchit. So whenever we are doing bhakti, it will increase. Next life also it will come in the same amount.
Let me just comment on your question, the question itself. Doing more doesn't mean bhakti increases. When bhakti increases, bhakti increases. Doing more doesn't equal more bhakti. Some people are passionate and do lots. And it's not necessarily bhakti. More is not necessarily bhakti. But yes, bhakti has the potential to increase, but actually bhakti has the potential to again become covered also. Covered doesn't mean lost, just means covered. Bharat. Yeah. Okay. One more, and then I'm going to read something. The ice cream. Is the microphone on? There's a button.
Sorry.
There we go. Why do you ask that question? Well, purity comes from mercy, and if you can try to make yourself more eligible for mercy. You show Krishna that I want purity, and that's through the medium of sadhana. That's the demonstration to Krishna that you want purity. And if there's some practical things where the senses and the mind are directed towards the pure, that's the sadhana practice. But it comes from mercy. Clear? We don't create purity, Krishna does. Okay. 2 online questions. Let's hear the 2 online questions.
First question is from Shri Padma Manjari Mataji. When we think of going back home, back to Godhead, we generally think of going back to Krishna Lok, away from the modes of material nature. Should we therefore aim for going back home as in consciousness rather than a place?
Both. Consciousness takes you to the place. And both, not one to the exclusion of the other.
Thank you, Maharaj. The second question is from Varsana Mataji. How to get consistent in our practices when it may not be possible to associate often with those that exemplify that quality?
Take seriously the opportunities that you do have for quality association. Even if it's, distant or virtual or whatever, because I know that Varsana does that. She associates with people that are distant, but on a regular basis, and that's how you ensure it. Now, I know some devotees, like devotees in China. They're in really remote places, and the circumstance is such that they really don't have much. But the same principle applies. It's virtual association, and by staying connected to instructions. Prabhupada has set the example for us. He was in a remote land where he had no association, but he had instructions. And the instructions were his life and soul. Now, he is advanced and we're not advanced. But we can learn from that example that we have some mission in life, and that mission in life you have, that's very clear. And you're acting under instructions of spiritual master. And, Guru Sadhu Shastra, and that's the qualitative association. Your situation isn't like what Prabhupada's was, but the principle is similar. Okay. This is a nice story. I gave the class on Sunday at the Chicago Temple and made mention of a website that has some stories of Lord Nrsingadev exhibiting his mercy to many devotees. And if you haven't gone there, this will be an encouragement for you to go there, because wait till you hear this one. It's from that same website. And you can look it up later, page 70. In South Africa, there was a family, a Vaishnava family, that had a 5-year-old daughter. This girl was a great, quote, fan of Nrsingadev. She found him simply funny, as he looked like half man, half lion, and she felt very attracted to him. She often told her playmates about her favorite god, a lion. And the kids always wondered about what kind of god this would be. She wasn't initiated, not even her parents. The father of the family followed a guru and surely later accepted initiation, but there was a small Hindu community that they were in touch with. So that's the scene. One day, the girl was playing outside with her friends beside the street in the lawn, and they were playing catch with a ball. The ball fell on the street, and the girl ran after her precious ball. There was usually no traffic, as a rarely used country road. But this time a very fast truck came running down the road. The girl, while playing, didn't see the truck coming. The father was on the upper floor of the house and saw his baby girl, 5 years old, baby girl, running in the street. He also saw the huge truck coming closer to his daughter with huge speed. The father yelled at her, but she didn't hear him. So he jumped out of the window to save his daughter and broke both his legs, remaining laying on the ground in pain. He had to watch how his little girl was hit by the truck, thrown through the air 20 meters away. All the children and neighbors around who observed this froze. From the other direction came a police car that also witnessed the accident. The truck went on, and the policeman stopped his car across the street to stop him, the truck driver. The truck driver hardly stopped his truck, and he seemed to be very drunk. The policeman immediately called the ambulance and ran over to the motionless girl laying on the grass. The hospital, the closest hospital, was a small private clinic. The ambulance came but refused to take the girl, being afraid they wouldn't have the necessary devices and machines to help the injuries the girl must have. They advised the policeman to call the main hospital, as only they could efficiently help her, as her spine must be broken, etc. The policeman was in despair, not even knowing where the father of the girl was. Actually, he didn't even know if the girl was still alive, and he didn't dare to touch her, not knowing how injured she was. However, in the end, she was brought to a good hospital. The policeman accompanied the girl, and also, finally, the father arrived with 2 broken legs. The chief doctor heard what happened to the girl, and they immediately x-rayed her to see the results. The policeman wanted to rest assured how the girl was doing and waited there to see the results. Everybody was shocked to hear what terrific accident had happened to the girl. The nurse brought the x-ray pictures to the doctor, who became very upset and started yelling at the nurse, saying that this is about life and death, and she should, for God's sake, bring the right pictures. He threatened to fire her, as it was unacceptable to make such mistakes. The nurse was scared and didn't understand what was happening. Those were the pictures of the 5-year-old girl that was hit by the truck. The nurse wasn't yet aware of what had happened to the girl. The doctor said, "This can't be," for on the x-ray, there was not a single broken bone. So the doctor repeated multiple times, "Impossible, it can't be." Then suddenly the girl awoke from having fainted, and then told the story in full consciousness, which made its tour through the media. She explained, in the moment when she picked up the ball from the street, she saw the truck coming up to her. The only thing she could do was to yell out for help. She didn't call for mommy or daddy, but for her Nrsingadev. In this moment, when the truck should hit her, she suddenly saw how Nrsingadev picked her up from the ground, smiled at her, and said, "Don't be afraid. Nothing will happen to you." The girl continued her story that the Lord had put her on the other side of the street into the grass. But when putting her down, he accidentally scratched her waist, which still hurt a bit. She spoke about how beautiful Nrsingadev was, his hair, his eyes, etc., but that his claws are very sharp, and he should cut his nails. He wore a golden dhoti, etc. The doctors didn't understand anything and told the policeman that the girl was still in shock and was hallucinating, which is normal. The girl was profoundly checked for any injuries, but the only injury they found on her body were those scratches. The doctor said this must be from a wild animal like a lion, as he had cases like this before. He was disturbed and asked if they had brought the right girl to the hospital, as this one was injured by a wild animal, not a truck. Nobody was clear about what had happened. The same doctor and the nurse who took care of her later became devotees, as they later learned from the parent who, quote, that lion was. The little girl was very attracted to this form of God, and in her despair she called him for help. Lord Nrsingadev did not look to see if she was initiated and had the right to call his name. He protects his devotees who sincerely worship him in their hearts. I'm sure this little girl was no common soul. Who knows what she did in her previous life? The person who he heard this story from heard that she would very much like to eat sweets and prepared a big, full plate of sweets for her, certain that she would not be able to eat it all up. He gave her the piled plate of sweets. She took some of the sweets and ran out to play with her friends. Page 70 to 74 in this thing that was sent out. So if you didn't get a copy, you can contact whoever is the MC at the Chicago Temple. It's online. It's a flip book, and you just click on the thing and it flips the pages, make the little clicking sound as the pages flip, and it's many stories of, contemporary stories of Lord Nrsingadev reciprocating with devotees. Not just, a big part of it is Nrsingadev in Mayapur, but Nrsingadev anywhere is Nrsingadev. He's very merciful and playful and affectionate. Although for the demons, as we hear from Prahlad, he shows another side. Anger. Because he doesn't like the devotees being put into difficulty. He's the protector of the devotees and the annihilator of the miscreants. Okay, that's the ice cream. Srila Prabhupada ki.